This video is one part of a multi-part series. We left part 1 at the conclusion of the Battle of the Astronomy Tower, except in this version of events, things went very differently. Dumbledore, alive and well, survived the battle because he never succumbed to temptation and put on the Gaunt Ring. And while Snape was still bound by his unbreakable vow to help Draco with his mission, Dumbledore successfully convinced Draco to abandon his task, eliminating Snape's obligation to kill Dumbledore. Snape, Dumbledore, Harry, and their unexpected new ally, Draco, then fight off the remaining Death Eaters. This leaves us with a number of things changed from the original timeline. Snape's cover is blown, Draco becomes an early witness against Voldemort's inner circle, and Hogwarts never falls into Death Eater control. The Elder One's allegiance never shifts, instead remaining firmly with Dumbledore, and Voldemort, who in the original timeline gained enormous momentum from this triumph, is instead dealt a humiliating setback by a Dumbledore who isn't showing any signs of slowing down. And because Snape openly defends Draco and stands in front of the Death Eaters, Harry never develops the deep mistrust that defined their relationship in canon. In fact, if anything, his trust in Snape solidifies. In the original story, however, the moments after the Battle of the Astronomy Tower are pretty bleak. Dumbledore is dead, the Death Eaters escape, and the Order of the Phoenix is left shaken and leaderless. Without Dumbledore's protection, Hogwarts quickly becomes vulnerable, eventually falling under Death Eater control as Snape is installed as headmaster, and the Carrows begin enforcing Voldemort's ideology. At the same time, the Ministry collapses from within. The Minister is killed, a puppet government is put in place, and Voldemort effectively seizes control of Wizarding Britain. With the school compromised and the government lost, Harry, Ron and Hermione are forced into hiding, beginning a desperate and directionless hunt for horcruxes with almost no guidance. Voldemort's rise becomes swift and overwhelming. Morale sinks across the Wizarding world, and by year's end, it feels as though his victory is inevitable. But guess what? If Dumbledore lives, none of that happens. So, what does happen? Let's dive into it. But before we dive in, a quick word from today's sponsor, Aura Frames. One moment that's always stood out to me in Harry Potter is when Sirius shows Harry the original Order of the Phoenix, a living snapshot of people who mattered, some of whom were long gone. It's a powerful reminder of how important it is to keep memories alive, and how much meaning a single photo can hold. And honestly, finding a gift that's meaningful without being over the top is always tough. That's why Aura Frames is such an easy pick this year. It's a digital frame that brings your memories to life. Plug it in, connect to Wi-Fi, and it becomes a constantly updating stream of your favorite moments, almost like having your own little magical photo album on your wall. You can preload photos before it ships, keep adding more all year long, and it arrives in a premium gift box. It's thoughtful, personal, and practically effortless. The model I'm using is the Aura Carver Mat. For a limited time, save on the perfect gift by visiting auraframes.com to get $35 off Aura's best-selling Carver Mat frames, named number 1 by Wirecutter, by using promo code HPTheory at checkout. That's auraframes.com, promo code HPTheory. This deal is exclusive to viewers and frames sell out fast, so order yours now to get it in time for the holidays. Support the channel by mentioning us at checkout. Terms and conditions apply. You can't wrap togetherness, but you can frame it. Hey everyone, welcome to another installment of Harry Potter Theory. Unsurprisingly, with Dumbledore remaining alive, a lot of things change, but also a lot of things remain the same. The story still moves toward the same final outcome, Voldemort's defeat, but in the immediate aftermath of the Battle of the Astronomy Tower, Hogwarts largely remains as it was before, and that's because nothing that significant really happens. Classes continue, students stay, and the castle does not fall into enemy hands. With Dumbledore still alive, Voldemort and the Death Eaters don't even attempt a takeover of the Ministry. Making a move that public while Dumbledore remains active is a risk Voldemort simply isn't willing to take. As a result, both Hogwarts and the Ministry remain intact, with the upcoming school year unfolding in a relatively normal way that is almost unrecognizable compared to the original timeline. Now, don't get me wrong, the threat of Voldemort still looms. Dumbledore surviving doesn't magically halt his rise to power. If Dumbledore's mere existence were enough to stop Voldemort outright, then Voldemort would have never risen in the first place. But crucially, Dumbledore is the only wizard Voldemort truly fears. And with Dumbledore still alive, alongside both the Ministry and Hogwarts holding firm, morale across the wizarding world remains far stronger than it ever was in the original timeline. In the days following the Battle of the Astronomy Tower, the wizarding world appears, at least on the surface, to have narrowly avoided disaster. Dumbledore makes no dramatic announcements, no public declarations of victory. He understands that panic would do Voldemort's work for him. But behind the scenes, a lot of things are set in motion, and Dumbledore begins coordinating, quietly, deliberately. For the following school year, security around Hogwarts is reinforced as Order members rotate through the castle under the guise of routine visits, quietly transforming the school into the Order of the Phoenix's central stronghold. Protective enchantments are strengthened, but subtly, enough to deter intrusion without announcing fear. Hogwarts remains a school first, but to prevent another incident like the Battle of the Astronomy Tower, it is no longer vulnerable. Instead of avoiding Hogwarts in the subsequent school year, Harry, Ron and Hermione actually do return for their 7th year, and for the first time since Voldemort's return, they are allowed something that loosely resembles stability. They attend classes, and they even sleep in their dormitories. They aren't fugitives on the run, camping out across the country. But all of this doesn't mean the Horcrux hunt is abandoned, only that it's no longer a burden Harry must carry alone. The difference is that it no longer unfolds in isolation or improvisation. Instead, it exists in parallel with the school year, structured, deliberate, and guided by Dumbledore's oversight. Harry is no longer left trying to piece together fragments of Voldemort's past on his own, and instead of being drip-fed memories and half-answers, he's brought fully into the picture much earlier. The shape of Voldemort's plan becomes clear. The Horcruxes are identified with purpose, and the hunt itself stops being reactive. It's planned, discussed, and approached with intent rather than desperation, all with Dumbledore standing right by his side. Just because Dumbledore survives, it certainly doesn't mean Voldemort's Horcruxes magically disappear. They still tether him to life, and destroying them remains the central objective of the war. Voldemort cannot be defeated while even one survives, and at this point, there are still many of them left. And because Dumbledore never puts on the Gaunt Ring in this timeline, you may be wondering what happened to it. I like to think that in this timeline, he treats it as nothing more than a Horcrux. He never touches it, never tests it, and never gives the curse a chance to activate. And so, using the Sword of Gryffindor, Dumbledore destroys the ring cleanly and quietly. No curse, no withered hand, no death sentence. And this leaves the Horcrux landscape exactly the same as it was at this point in the original timeline. But before we get into all of that, let's quickly take a look at what happens to Draco. Because although his story changes, it's probably not in the way you might have expected. Once Draco lowers his wand on the Astronomy Tower and accepts Dumbledore's offer, he effectively exits the war. He isn't paraded, redeemed, or positioned as a key figure moving forward. Instead, he is quietly placed under Ministry protection and kept out of sight. Not because he's important, but because he's vulnerable. He's not particularly valuable to either faction, so making sure that he's protected and surveilled is really all that needs to be done. And perhaps most importantly, because Draco never disarms Dumbledore in this timeline, his role in the larger magical chain simply ends there. He never becomes master of the Elder Wand, and he never unknowingly alters the course of the war. His path forward is intentionally small, and that's the point. Draco's significance in this timeline lies entirely in what doesn't happen. But while Draco is tucked away, the consequences of his defection do heavily impact his family. Voldemort does not forgive failure, and betrayal is worse. With Draco removed from his grasp, Voldemort turns his attention to Lucius Malfoy. And rather than simply discarding Lucius, Voldemort does something far crueler. He punishes him. In this timeline, it's not Draco who is repeatedly tasked with impossible, humiliating assignments. It's Lucius. And Voldemort, ever theatrical in his cruelty, forces Lucius to confront the ultimate punishment, the expectation that he will be the one to hunt down and kill his own son. As for Narcissa, her role quietly fades as well. There's no moment in the Forbidden Forest where she must lie to Voldemort, no desperate gamble to save Harry, no forced act of defiance born out of necessity. The trio is never captured by snatchers, never brought to Malfoy Manor, and never placed in her path again. Now let's take a look at the next character influenced by Dumbledore's survival, Snape. I happen to believe that Snape's path is the one that deviates most heavily from a surviving Dumbledore. When Snape openly intervenes on the Astronomy Tower, his position becomes unsustainable, and whether any individual Death Eater fully understands what they witnessed almost doesn't matter, because Voldemort will. Snape was present at the moment his most important plan collapsed, and from Voldemort's perspective, there is only one explanation for that kind of failure: betrayal. But unfortunately for Voldemort, Snape is safe and sound so long as he isn't caught out on his own. And even though he becomes an open Death Eater defector in the eyes of Voldemort, it doesn't really matter, because he's still under the protection of Dumbledore, who is very much alive. Which means that Snape's role doesn't end when his cover is blown, it simply changes shape. With Dumbledore alive, there is no need to preserve Snape's position inside Voldemort's inner circle at all costs. The entire reason for keeping Snape embedded no longer exists. Freed from that constraint, Snape can finally act openly, albeit cautiously. He doesn't become a public figure, and he certainly doesn't return to teaching as if nothing has changed. But he does remain involved, strategically, deliberately, and constantly. Snape's value now lies not in what he can secretly pass along, but in what he already knows. Voldemort's psychology, his patterns of punishment, the structure of his followers, and how he reacts when control slips from his grasp. With Snape no longer acting as a double agent, he also fulfills a role in the Horcrux hunt. He doesn't suddenly become the one leading it, and he doesn't possess secret knowledge of Voldemort's Horcruxes themselves, but he does become instrumental in shaping how the hunt unfolds. And that's because a lot of Snape's value lies in his understanding of Voldemort's thinking. Not his secrets, but his patterns. He knows how Voldemort chooses hiding places, how he layers protections, and how deeply sentiment still governs his decisions despite everything he claims about being above it. Snape helps Dumbledore anticipate which Horcruxes Voldemort would prioritize protecting once he realizes they are being targeted. He advises on how Voldemort responds to failure, when he tightens defenses, when he grows reckless, and when he overcorrects. Because of Snape's insights, the Horcrux hunt stops being a blind search and instead becomes a more calculated process of prediction. But just as important are the things Snape doesn't do anymore. In the original timeline, Snape is forced into actions that actively strengthen Voldemort's position. He advises Voldemort on countermeasures, he helps plan the Seven Potters, unintentionally enabling the chain of events that leads to Mad-Eye Moody's death, and he feeds Voldemort just enough information to maintain his cover, even when that information costs lives, forced to choose between maintaining his cover and protecting people. And fortunately, none of that happens here. Yes, the Order loses the advantage of Snape as a double agent, but they don't lose Snape himself. And more importantly, that loss is more than offset by the fact that they keep Dumbledore alive. Now, it goes without saying that a long list of failures like Dumbledore surviving, Draco defecting, Snape being revealed as a double agent, and a failure to take over Hogwarts is not something that would go unnoticed for Voldemort. And he, of course, does not take this lightly. The failure on the Astronomy Tower was supposed to mark the beginning of his uncontested rise. Dumbledore was meant to die, Hogwarts was meant to fracture, and the Ministry was meant to fall shortly after. Instead, none of that happens. Dumbledore remains alive, active, and perhaps most unsettling of all, unchanged. At first, Voldemort tells himself that Dumbledore's survival is temporary, that this is merely a delay, an inconvenience, not a reversal. Dumbledore is old, mortal, and standing in the way of what Voldemort believes is inevitable. And if we know anything about Voldemort, it's that patience has never been his strong suit. The longer Dumbledore remains active, visible, unweakened, and unmistakably in control, the more it gnaws at him. What was supposed to be a clean turning point becomes an open humiliation. The plan failed, his followers failed, and worst of all, the world saw it happen. And though Voldemort's position weakens, his response is not restraint, it's escalation. He begins acting earlier than he intended, tightening his grip on his remaining followers and punishing failure with open cruelty. Decisions that would have once been measured become reactive. He lashes out, not because it's strategically optimal, but because he cannot tolerate the idea that Dumbledore is still shaping events unchecked. He accelerates plans that were never meant to be rushed, reinforces defenses that draw attention instead of concealing them, and turns inward at the exact moment he should be expanding outward. The war becomes louder, more violent, and far less subtle. And what this means is that Voldemort exhausts his option of a full-scale attack on Hogwarts much sooner. In a frenzy, he recruits as much support as he can. Dementors, giants, werewolves, the lot, falsely promising them a seat at the table when he rises to power. In the original story, the Battle of the Astronomy Tower occurs on June 30th, 1997, and Voldemort waged his final all-out war on Hogwarts during the Battle of Hogwarts, which occurred on May 2nd, 1998. This leaves a pretty healthy window for the trio to hunt horcruxes. And although in this timeline I suspect Voldemort would attack prematurely, it's also worth considering that the horcrux hunt would have gone a lot more smoothly, with the trio working in tandem with Dumbledore and Snape. In both timelines, there are 5 horcruxes left after the Battle of the Astronomy Tower. The diary is already gone, and the ring, while still intact at that moment, is destroyed shortly thereafter. What remains are the locket, the cup, the diadem, Nagini, and Harry himself, though that final truth remains hidden for now. The crucial difference, however, is who is hunting them. Instead of 3 teenagers working in isolation, operating on fragments of information and guesswork, you now have the combined knowledge of Dumbledore, the tactical precision of Snape, and the trio acting as boots on the ground. And this basically changes everything. With Dumbledore and Snape actively involved, the Horcrux hunt is expedited significantly through precision, planning, and information that the trio simply never had access to on their own. Crucially, this timeline never loses access to the real Sword of Gryffindor. Because Dumbledore survives, the sword is never removed from Hogwarts for safekeeping, and no replica is left behind. Instead, Dumbledore ensures that the genuine blade remains under his direct control, and from the very beginning of the hunt, they possess a weapon capable of reliably destroying Horcruxes. The locket is dealt with first. Dumbledore already knows of its existence and its connection to the Gaunt family, and with Snape quietly suppressing Death Eater attention around Grimmauld Place, Kreacher is recovered almost immediately. In the original timeline, this Horcrux only comes into the trio's possession after a dangerous Ministry infiltration and months of strain. Next comes Hufflepuff's cup. Bellatrix's Gringotts vault was always the most obvious hiding place, not because it was clever, but because Voldemort trusted her obsession more than any ward. In the original timeline, retrieving it required a chaotic break-in, a dragon, and the moment that finally alerted Voldemort to the Horcrux hunt. Dumbledore understands this immediately. He doesn't storm the bank or gamble on secrecy. He waits, he watches, and when Bellatrix is briefly drawn away on Voldemort's orders, the cup is removed quietly. The diadem is the final Horcrux to fall in this phase of the hunt. Dumbledore's understanding of Hogwarts, combined with Snape's familiarity with the castle's hidden passages and magical blind spots, dramatically narrows the search. In the original timeline, its discovery ends in fiendfire and near catastrophe. Here, Ravenclaw's lost diadem is recovered from the Room of Requirement without chaos, without fire, and without the near catastrophe that unfolded in the original timeline. And so, one by one, through the joint efforts of the trio, Snape and Dumbledore, Voldemort's safeguards disappear in silence. And that perhaps is the most dangerous part for him, because by the time he realizes something is wrong, the war he thought he was still preparing for is already slipping out of his control. This also makes his haphazard and most importantly emotional, premature attack on Hogwarts even more dangerous. I think this is also a good place to leave part 2. In the next video, we'll pick up with Voldemort's premature attack on Hogwarts, and then break down how Dumbledore's survival reshapes the prophecy, alters the path of the Elder Wand, and fundamentally changes the fate of both Harry and Voldemort. If I missed anything, or if you have any suggestions for part 3, let me know down in the comment section below. Dumbledore surviving really does mess things up as far as the original timeline is concerned, so it's entirely possible that I've forgotten something. Also, if you enjoy the content, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, remember, it does not do to dwell on dreams and forget to live.